You have a budget, right? And you have to spend your budget on mixing or mastering. Where do you spend that money? You spend it on mixing 100% of the time, because if I get a mix in that is great, I'm not doing barely anything to it. If you give an AI algorithm a good one, like a LANDR, right? I'm biased, but we spent more money and more time on this than anybody else has. It's going to give you a good master because the mix was good. The place that AI isn't so great yet across the board is when you feed it something that is really problematic, but it has a lot of nuanced problems that aren't very common. So where I'm having to go in and be like a surgeon to your music and cut things out and try to turn the vocals up and down and all that type of stuff, AI isn't there yet for that. But that really honestly means you should have spent more time on your mix, right? So I think AI can be great, and it just depends upon where you are in the food chain, what your budget is, what it's for.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Third edition is out now. All formats, hardcover, ebook, audiobook, however you like books, you can find the book. Today, my guest is Daniel Rowland. He is a mastering engineer, a mixing engineer, and a producer. He is also the VP of Strategy and Partnerships at LANDR. I think everyone is familiar with LANDR, and LANDR initially started as kind of this automated mastering service, mastering company. They've now expanded, and they're very impressive with all of the features that they have. Full disclosure, they are a partner of Ari's Take, but as you know, longtime readers and listeners know that we only take on partners of companies that we believe in. And LANDR's great. I mean, they have sample packs, and they have plugins, and they have collaboration tools, distribution. They're part of my distribution comparison article, and of course, mastering. That's how they started. That's how they kind of got on everyone's map, was they had these great automated mastering tools. And Daniel is a mastering engineer. He has mastered over 3,000 credits to his name, over 15 billion streams. That's with a B. Multiple Grammy nominations. I mean, he's mastered everything from Gale, ABCDFU, to Forest Black, to Kai, to Flo Rida, a lot of video game stuff, Walker Hayes, on and on and on. Again, 3,000 mastering credits, 15 billion streams or so. We spend actually the most amount of time, and this is the only episode I think we've had on this, where we talk mastering. Mastering everything from digital mastering to mastering for vinyl, the importance of mastering, what people are using mastering for, how to master. I mean, we don't really get into the technical side of it. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a mastering engineer. So I come at it from the artist perspective. So we speak about in terms that a layperson can understand, artists can understand, even the managers listening to this. I think you'll appreciate this, because I also bring up some issues that I've had with mastering, and like why so many new vinyl record presses sound like shit from big labels, from some major labels, some big independent labels. I call out some of them by name. I don't care. Master your shit better. And, we talk about just mastering and the purpose of it. Now, personally, I've worked with some of the best mastering engineers in the world for some of my music, like Greg Calby and Bernie Grundman and Scott Hull. I've also worked with some bedroom mastering producers. I've also used LANDR to master some like demos and stems and fan-only releases on Bandcamp and stuff like that. So it was like I have a fair understanding, and I've also pressed some vinyl. So I have a fair understanding of mastering and its purpose and like its limitations, the automated services, and also like with the process of getting stuff mastered for vinyl and working with the plants and all of that. But I was really fascinated by Daniel's perspective on all of this. As a mastering engineer, as an employee of LANDR, of someone who's worked at LANDR for 10 years, he talks about how he got a ton of pushback. People very emotional when they heard he worked at LANDR early on, thinking that, LANDR was going to steal people's jobs and it was going to kill mastering. 13 years into this thing, it has not. There are a lot of mastering engineers out there, and he said he's as busy as ever as a mastering engineer, actually mastering records himself for labels, for artists, all of that. Even though he works at LANDR, he's not pumping the stuff through LANDR, and he'll talk about that. The purpose of, what automated mastering programs like LANDR are good for, what they're not good for, and when to turn to real mastering, human mastering engineers, and when you can turn to AI programs. And we do get into AI. We spend actually the last bit of this conversation all on AI. And he has a really interesting perspective as someone working at a big company, a big technology company like LANDR that has been experimenting and is innovating with AI tools for the creator community. So unlike Suno and Udio that created their tools by stealing all of our work and creating the tools for non-musicians and non-producers to just like pump out full songs with a few prompts, LANDR is different. LANDR is creating tools for producers, for engineers, for musicians, for artists, all of that. And so his perspective on how we are using AI and what AI can be used for, I thought was very fascinating. And it actually was very inspiring. So I would encourage everyone to listen to this episode, definitely all the way to the end. We really get into the meat of a lot of this. And if you're curious about mastering or just like want to geek out a little bit on a mastering conversation that you never get to have, that's what we did for most of this, which was actually a lot of fun for me because I never get to do this. I hope you enjoy. You can find Daniel Rowland on LinkedIn. You can find LANDR, of course, LANDR.com. LANDR, they're also on the socials. Find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. Find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. Actually, I'm also very active now on Threads at Ari's Take. So on the Ari's Take account on Threads, I reference it, but I'm now starting to go in and use it more actively. So if you're on there, you can find me there at Ari's Take. But most importantly, actually visit aristake.com. Get on our email list. That's the best way to stay in touch with us. aristake.com. Get on the email list. If you wouldn't mind, just pause this episode right now. Just hit pause real quick. Leave us a 5-star review. However you listen to this, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the follow button. And while you're at it, head over to aristake.com and sign up on our email list. All right, let's kick into the show. Daniel Rowland, welcome to the show.
What is going on, Ari? Good to chat, man.
What's up? So this is interesting. You know, I've never really had an engineer on the show. I think most people in the new music business wear many hats. So I think a lot of the artists, a lot of the producers are also engineers. We're all working in DAWs and our computers and whatever. Yeah. But like, you know, there's been this debate around mastering for many years. And I mean, I was just like yesterday arguing with someone over on Threads, which I've now like really gotten into, about mastering like digital versus vinyl, and like why is vinyl so hard to master, and why does new vinyl sound so much worse than old vinyl or whatever. But before we get into that, and I'd love to get into that discussion because like I am a vinyl nut, and I am curious your take on all this. But give me a little background on yourself and kind of how you found yourself in this position of you know, being a mastering engineer, but all around engineer and producer, yeah, sure. I know. But give me all of that background before we kind of jump into the full depths of everything.
Yeah, I'll give you the short version. But yeah, sure. I mean, I come from being a musician first, right? For 10 years, that was my only job, is playing in clubs and doing that as a guitar player, and then less so as a average singer. Yeah. And so I did that, man, and I ended up, you know, wanting to try to make a career out of that. So I went to school for it, right? So I was like mid-20s. I went to college and got you know, I didn't want to go for jazz or for classical. So I ended up getting a bachelor's of science in like music technology, sort of like music studio recording is what it was, sure. Right? And then I went and got a master's degree in that as well. So in that Middle Tennessee State University, just outside of Nashville. Yeah. So, and I've been a professor now at MTSU for 15 years. So I started teaching while I was a student and then never left. Amazing. I've been teaching there remotely. So anyway, cool. But yeah, I backed into all sorts of weird stuff in this industry. We'll talk about later, I'm sure. But I wasn't an engineer first, long story short. And then I kind of became a producer and produced a ton of stuff. And then I started to be more on the engineering side. So it was kind of the last thing that I got to, strangely enough, by necessity. Right, I was working with artists who didn't have a budget for a mix engineer, so I became the mix engineer, even though I probably was wildly underqualified to do that. And then by nature from that, the mastering engineer. So I came to it the same way you're mentioning a lot of artists come to it, right? Just by necessity. And then, you know, putting in a ton of hours to, you know, just from working with artists, and got good at it. So it wasn't something I ever intended to really do. You know, I like studio recording, but I wasn't a mixing and mastering guy, but I kind of am now. So there you go. Yeah. And so then, so you got in through necessity. And would you say over the last, I don't know, 5-10 years or so, you've found yourself more on the mastering side, mixing side, production? Where do you live now? Primarily? Yeah, I kind of, so my career is kind of weird. Like I started sort of as a teacher first, and I won't get into all of this, but I kind of, through going to college, I kind of had to teach to get a graduate teaching assistant. So I started as that. I definitely was a music producer first. and then did the mastering and mixing thing. These days, because I also kind of pivoted into working with tech companies, LANDR being the one I've been at for 10 years now.
Right.
I didn't have as much time to produce music. So I found myself, because you could producing a song or producing an album with a band could take a week. It could take 3 months, right? There's an unknown variable to that equation. And, as my time, the availability I had started to whittle down through all the stuff I was involved in, I pivoted kind of naturally into mastering and in mixing, though I predominantly focus on Atmos mixing. I don't do much stereo mixing these days. It's all Atmos and then stereo mastering. And I've done, I think this week I'll hit 3,000 major label projects on mastering alone. So I've done a lot of it. Yeah, like 15 billion streams or something. It's crazy now. Oh yeah, how much of that I've done. But so it's been the
incredible.
past. Yeah, to answer your question, in the past 10 years is basically when I pivoted more to the engineering side and some limited production here or there when I want to do fun projects.
Sure. Well, actually, let's talk Atmos, Dolby Atmos, and surround sound and all of that. Because, is that like, do you think this is a fad, or is this the direction that we are moving into?
That's a loaded question, right? Because I'm somebody who does a fair bit of that work, but I'm also very critical of it as well when it comes to music and the necessity that. So Atmos is amazing for cinema, right? It's amazing for home theater stuff. Of course, right? It's like meant for that. And then music, it's kind of like, but it's also cool for music, right? But the budgets, especially if you're an independent or even if you're not, labels struggle with this all the time. The majors, like, what do they devote resources to, right? Is it the marketing your music? Is Atmos something that's really going to see are you going to see a big return on that investment? If you're an artist, when you could be spending that money elsewhere, that's tricky, right? At the moment, I think Atmos for music is cool for the people who are really into it, right? And if the label or the artist has spent the money to hire a good engineer to do it and not just kind of doing it to check a box, then it's interesting. But it's not. It's not something I would budget for if I was an independent artist. I would be looking at other ways to spend my money at the moment. But having said that, you can find Atmos engineers for very inexpensive to do mixes for you, right? If that's something you really want to do. And there is some, and I'm kind of going off on a tangent, there is some benefits to doing it, right? When it comes to placement on Apple Music, people have heard that. When it comes to potentially getting a little bit more revenue, it's intangible, right?
Yeah.
So is it a fad? A lot of people would shoot me if I said it was a fad. But for music, I'll just say it hasn't found its foothold yet, right? We're all listening on headphones. The binaural experience is not awesome, right? So when people are listening to your music, they're not really getting a great immersive experience at this point. Maybe they will in the future, but it's tricky, man. So
right. Apple's calling it spatial audio, I guess. When you have their their gear they're coming out with, like the AirPod Maxes and whatnot. Even the AirPod. The big ones around the ear ones, or even like the smaller earbuds. There is a difference there. It's cool. I enjoy it. Like I when I first tested it out, when it first came out, and Apple Music had their playlist of mixed for Atmos, and I listened to, I think it was Rocket Man.
Dude, that's the one everyone heard. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, and I cried. I swear to God, it's incredible. Like, I felt like, there were things in that recording I'd never heard before in that mix, just by the nature of a stereo mix. And oh my gosh, I felt like I was Elton, I felt like I was in the room, in the band. And so, for that, it's really cool. And I've sat in Atmos outfitted mixing studios with that was actually set up by a Dolby engineer, and they came over with their whole sound pack, and they got the room all set up and everything. And I listened to their samples of I think there was a John Williams score that they put on, which was
stunning,
unbelievable, stunning. I literally felt like I was in the viola section. It was unbelievable. And then we listened to something on the other end of the spectrum, I don't know, some pop song, and it was just very cool to hear it, but it it's I don't know, in the club, I guess you could hear it maybe if you wanted, if the club is gonna, I don't even know if clubs have outfitted for that, but similar to a theater experience, it could be kind of cool.
Yeah, some theaters certainly do. There's, you've got, I'm in Vegas right now, and the They've got the Dolby live theater here that is a Atmos theater, and I have some buddies in Maroon 5, and I go there and get to sit in front of house and kind of listen to them,
That's cool.
Put together their show and that. And it's cool, It's the challenge is, right, if you listen to Atmos in an actual Atmos studio, which I've got one of those, right, or on a properly set up home theater system, it'll melt your brain, right? It's not a question of whether it's amazing. It is amazing. Like if you can experience the way it's meant to be experienced, it will knock your socks off. The problem is that very few people at the moment will ever have access to that sort of a thing, right? We all have access to headphones, right? And and it's not even the fault of the headphone. It's the binaural encoding technology that we use to get that multi-channel mix down into a binaural mix to decode into your headphones, right? And is still evolving, right? And it'll get better. And there may be a day where we really feel fully immersed on headphones. And if a mix is done really well, it kind of feels that way a bit. The problem is it's just not enough of that content out there. And it's everyone also, last thing on this, not to turn this into an Atmos podcast, we all have different ears, man. Like the way that we literally hear things in headphones is different. Unless you have an HRTF profile molded for your ear, the mix is literally going to sound different to me than it is to you. It may sound immersive to me and not to you. It's a problem. Yeah.
Have you, to go on a little tangent, and I have them right here. Have you ever had the experience with these? I think they went out of business, but do you know about these Neurophone headphones?
I've heard of them before.
Have you heard of Neurophone?
No, yeah.
You do have a pair? It's like...
No, I said I don't have a pair. I've heard of them, though. Yeah.
I don't think they make them anymore, but these were honestly like the greatest headphones I've ever had because like what you're talking about, it has an app and initially it scans your ears and then it EQs the headphones for your ears. And so it was wild, and I'd never experienced music like this before. And I'm not like a trained engineer, have the background, or I haven't studied or any of that. But it made the setting for my ears. And then I put the headphones on my wife, and she's like, ugh, this sounds horrible. Like I've never heard music sound this bad before. Right. And then it scanned her ears and made the profile for hers. And it's like, holy shit, this sounds incredible. Similarly, I put it on my ears. It was like, wow, this sounds awful. Like it's unlistenable to me. Yeah. And to me, I was like, wow, it really is. I mean, everyone's ears are so different. I don't know how anything sounds good in any headphones after that experience.
It's impressive, right? And even with AirPods, right? They have, you can take Apple has their app. You can take a picture of your ear. It will try to create a custom head-related transfer function.
Oh, shit, I didn't know that. That's cool.
To EQ your AirPods to your ear. There's a lot of services that have that are freely available out there once you actually have the hardware. And again, it makes a surprising difference when you do that type of stuff.
It really does. But yeah, right. I mean, I've never had a music listening experience like I had sitting in a Dolby Atmos fitted mixing studio. So I'm assuming you have one at home because you're doing so many, or your studio.
Yeah, I have a studio in Santa Monica that I share with my my Atmos partner, Matt Geiler. So we do most of our mixing out of there. And you can do a fair bit of Atmos on headphones, surprisingly enough, though you can't get it all the way there. You can get a lot of the placement down. You can get a lot of the kind of the general, if you really know what you're doing, you can get a lot of the general stuff there, and then you check it in a studio and make some tweaks, and you're off to the races.
Yeah. That's great. Now, do people master the Atmos mixes?
That's another boy. We're getting nerdy. So mastering, is very different for Atmos than it is for stereo, right? So Atmos, stereo music, if you send me a song and you ask me to master that song, right? I could master that song like a hip hop track. I could master it like a rock track. I could make it deafeningly loud if that's what you want. I could leave it super dynamic and vibey if that's what you want, because there's no rules, right? It's literally whatever you want me to do, I can do. Atmos is different because there's actually technical specifications that you have to hit so that it will be accepted when you give it to Apple Music or Amazon or Tidal or those services that accept that content, which means it has to be really dynamic. I can't do as much as I would do to a stereo mix to an Atmos mix. So yes, there's absolutely still mastering for Atmos. Where I see it the most used is if you have, mixes by a bunch of different engineers, right? So they need to be kind of gelled together, similar to stereo mastering. Or the big use for it is if you're just doing it on headphones at your house. You're like, I can't afford an Atmos engineer, so I'm going to kind of do it myself in Pro Tools or Logic. Then you send it to somebody like me or another mastering engineer who can put it on speakers in a proper studio and say, oh, shit, you did a good job, but this is wrong. Let me fix this. And they can really adjust it and take it that last 25% or 30% of the way. So that's where I see a lot of mastering being done, is to help kind of home studio cats who don't have a system still make something that sounds good enough to release.
Yeah, and so mastering is interesting for me. I just got the master back for a new single that I'm releasing soon. I just got it back last week, and I went a couple rounds with the mastering engineer.
Yeah, sure.
And it was interesting because like this was actually the first time I'd ever gotten a master back where the master was darker than the final mix, and I was actually shocked. I was stunned. I was like. It was my first time working with this mastering engineer, and I was like, oh shit. And they're renowned. They have a gazillion credits. They're great. And actually, I love a lot of the records. That's why I went with them. I was like, I was like a huge fan of some recent records they'd done. And then I got this back, and it was like just dark and just like, I was like, oh no, I made the run. And then, I gave a note, and then the next master they turned in was great. But it brightened it up, and it was fine. But like, I've worked with some great mastering engineers like Greg Calby out of Sterling Sound or Scott Hall, who are like, amazing, legends of the mastering world. I've also worked with like a mastering engineer on the cheap, who worked like probably out of headphones or something, and I don't know. And like for, $100 and it were $85, I think. And it was like, I've done a lot of it, but how I understand mastering, and this is like as a lay singer-songwriter musician, I'm not an engineer. When I produce records, it's really, we get musicians in a room and we make the record, and I'm not in the box at all. That's not my style of creation. But how I understand it is it's like, you sparkle the highs a little bit, you beef up the lows, you thump it, you can make it louder. And that's kind of like, okay, that's mastering for me. But I know how important it is because like it's like when I A/B a final mix to a master, it's night and day for me. Yeah. And also like when I listen to other people's final mixes, I'm like, we really need a good mastering for this. Give me your definition of what mastering is for someone who like, we're all musicians that are listening to this, or at least in the music industry. And but give me your definition of mastering, and you can start broad and get technical because I want to know from it's the actual technician's mouth.
Right. It's multi-layered, right? And it depends upon how you're working and blah, blah, blah. But it involves a few different things, right? One of which is what you said, which is either the sonic enhancement or the sonic balancing of a song, right? And we're not even talking about an album, right? We're just talking about an individual track that you send.
Let's talk song first,
the idea is that it should not just sound good, but it should translate across. You should be able to listen to it in your car. You should be able to listen to it on your computer, off of your phone, in headphones, and it should sound good, right? It doesn't sound great in one spot and not another, which can be tricky, which is why oftentimes we monitor on a lot of different systems, right? So we kind of know what it's going to sound like when you get it in your hands, not just on my really nice speakers, right? That's right. It's like the Atmos thing. It's great that I have a nice studio, but you're never going to listen to the music there. So what am I doing if that's all I'm listening to? So that's part of it, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean, making it, turning up the highs or lows. It's going in and pulling, resonances out of vocals and doing. I used to think that mastering was just like EQ, compression, and some limiting, and like that's what mastering is. And now, I use 10 or 15 processors sometimes on some mixes that I have to go in, and I do stem separation on mixes to adjust the level of the vocal balance. You do like the most crazy nuanced stuff that the artist never knows because you don't tell them, right? But it's nuts. So you got just doing whatever is necessary to make the track sound the way that it should sound. And you actually brought up something that is, your experience with that dark master you just got back. Mastering is also subjective, right? It's a science and it's an art. And like you will, I did this killed me. I did a project this past week for the band Korn, right? The KORN Korn band. Yeah.
Of course. Oh yeah.
And, and it's something that I was really into, and boy, they didn't like my master, right? I gave it to them and like, it's a master because it was dark, because like they're a band that's known for really, really bright guitars and stuff that was a little bit ear piercing to me relative to the other music I'm working on a regular basis. I would do a lot of hip hop, and which is a lot more bass heavy, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of applied and they have a lot of hip hop vibe to their music. So I was applying some of that methodology to their sound, and it didn't work. And then I sent them a revision and they loved it, and it's approved and it's out, it'll be out in the world here. But it's like, there's also, that's why that back and forth has to happen. Mastering, you need to understand it as the artist, whether it's the mix engineer, the producer, the mastering engineer, you have agency over your art, and you need to, if you don't like something, you're the expert at the end of the day on the way it should sound, right? Even so somebody else gave you something and they have lots of credit. Right. Yeah, they have lots of credits and you feel like, oh man, they know what's best. No, ultimately you know what's best. It's your shit, right? So I try to make sure everybody I work with knows that. Like, don't, just because I've done a bunch of stuff doesn't mean that I know exactly what's right for your music. Like, let's have a conversation and let's give me some feedback.
Yeah, so, no, that's really helpful and good to hear, because I personally, as the artist, like when I got this master back, and I'd never worked with this mastering engineer before, like I was initially a little bummed, and then worried. I was just like, man, are they going to take feedback well? Like,
yeah, sure. Some don't, and yeah,
some. Well, that was my thing. It's just like right. It's like, have you experienced that where a mastering engineer is like not going to take feedback well?
Well, it's interesting. Mastering engineers developed a reputation for kind of being curmudgeons a little bit, right? Because they are, you got to think about it. Through the history of mastering engineers were like the final say on what was right before something went out. Because we just talked about the sonic enhancement or the balancing of a file, right? To make it competitive with whatever else is out in a similar genre in the market. Translation. There's also, you're going in and restoring a file. If there's pops and clicks, or you didn't do your crossfades right in your DAW, or you kicked the microphone stand. Like a lot of times we're going in and pulling all of that stuff out, stuff that's non-musical that we don't feel is intentional, right? And you have to make artistic judgments about that, about what serves the track and what doesn't. So you could do no edits on that, or I could do 200 edits in 1 3-minute song, just pulling out anomalies and distortion and things that I just think are going to distract the listener. And then
isn't that a mixing engineer's job? Like, isn't that for the editing process of mixing or even producing?
You would think so, but this is another shocking thing I found out as I kind of continued to level up in the mastering game, is that the things that I'm listening for are not the things that a producer is listening for, or even a mix engineer. And sometimes it's things you really don't hear unless you got headphones on. And if you're a mix guy and you're just listening on speakers and spot checking on headphones, you're not going to hear a lot of these little pops and clicks. And I work with some of the top mastering engineers on the planet, and I'll still go in and pull stuff out of theirs. That's why they're hiring me. Like, their mixes are amazing.
Mixing engineers, right?
Yeah, mixing engineers. I'm not really going to do much to their mix as a mastering guy, because they're badasses. But it's stuff like that. Like, they're basically using me to QC. Did I miss something either in my mix, which is oftentimes not, or some kind of technical error that's in there that you could
that's terrifying out. As the artist.
The artist never knows about this stuff. We don't even talk about this kind of stuff.
I'm like, oh God, hearing that is like my heart's in my stomach right now. But okay.
But to your question, and then just to wrap up both questions that you had asked.
Yeah.
The last thing on the mastering side is kind of the delivery of files, right? So we're delivering to a label or to an artist files in a number of different formats. Potentially different sample rates, TV mixes, a cappella, instrumental, all that stuff has to be mastered so that you can go out for sync if you need to do that. And all of those have to be right. And that doesn't even get into, mastering for an album. But long story short, that's a lot of mastering engineers take all that on, and they're kind of the final say. So they did get a reputation as being kind of like pushing back on feedback necessarily on a master. Like, no, I kind of know what's right. Here's what you should do. And that's okay in certain situations if the artist really maybe doesn't know what they want. But I think ultimately, man, it's a service industry. And the worst thing that could happen to me would be that I gave somebody back a piece of music that in 5 years they regret working with me on because I put it in a direction that they didn't want. And I think these days, I've not run into mastering engineers who are assholes, honestly. But boy, 20 years ago, I definitely ran into a few of them. I will say that.
Sure. I bet. Let's talk, you said the delivery and formats. I mean, the most common way that people are consuming music these days, obviously, is streaming. I've heard something. Now, I'm going to show my ignorance. I don't know what LUFS are. I don't know what So talk to me about like the LUFS or the negative 14 LUFS that I've heard of that you got to master for digital or for streaming. Like, tell me the difference between mastering for streaming, because that's how we're mostly delivering it for, versus mastering for. I mean, I guess just let's start digital. It's like streaming versus CDs. And then, I know vinyl is a whole other beast, which I'm curious. Have you done vinyl? Master for vinyl too?
I did some vinyl this week, actually. Now, when I say I did vinyl, there's I am taking music that I am mastering for streaming and maybe even for physical CD release, right? And I am tweaking it a little bit for a vinyl engineer to actually cut onto.
You're not cutting the lacquer.
No. Right. I'm not. And when I say I'm an engineer, I'm not a vinyl engineer like that. Like those are real engineers.
And I want to get into that because I have a lot of questions about that. But let's just start with delivering the formats, mastering for streaming versus CDs or something. Man. Is there a difference? What are you doing for that?
Yeah, wars are fought over this, right? Over and I get asked this question a lot, and then through LANDR, I get asked this question a lot about how people should deliver their mixes for mastering and all that type of stuff, right? So it's so in the era of CDs, right? It was like make your stuff as loud as possible, right? That was really common.
The loudness wars, of course.
Yeah, well, which still exists, by the way. Loudness wars haven't gone anywhere. I've never had somebody allow me to give. Well, I'll say this: in the last 1,000 masters I've done, less than 50 have been ones where people wanted them anything but loud as hell, right? And that's independent artists in major. Oh yeah, it's very rare. And I'll do something for like a David Foster or or somebody like that, right? Who's doing like a big orchestral thing, and it's let that breathe. But even film soundtracks like John Wick or something like that I've worked on, those are crushed, man. Those are as loud as a Metallica album.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And if you know what you're doing, and especially with a lot of the modern tools we have, you can still sound pretty good loud, but it does lose impact, blah, blah, blah. That's the whole argument around the loudness word.
The dynamic range and all that, right?
It is. And there is something, that is a real thing, right? I mean, you don't get the impact of your snare drum, but there is an aesthetic to loud music, right? It does have a certain vibe to it that you don't get when something's more dynamic. So it's a taste thing. But to your point, when you're thinking about streaming, so streaming services are a bit different, right? Because what they've done is, and a lot of people may have heard of this, is loudness normalization, right? So because what they don't want to have happen is they don't want Ari's song to play and then Daniel's song to play and have one be super loud and one be super quiet, right? That used to be the case with commercials on television, right? Where a commercial would come on and blow you away and the show would be low. And it's like, no, we got to have some kind of standard to fix that because it sucks as a listener and a viewer. So streaming services have done that with loudness normalization. So what they'll do, they all have different standards of like minus 14 or minus 16 LUFS, basically, which are just loudness units. It's a way to measure perceived loudness. And as an engineer, it just means like if your song is louder than that, they're just going to turn it down, right? That's all they're going to do. They're going to turn it down so that everything kind of is on the same playing field loudness-wise, so the listener isn't taken out of an experience when a hip-hop song comes on and is super loud and a singer-songwriter song comes on and it's quiet. Right. Now, not to be long-winded about this. So in theory, as a mastering engineer, I would be mastering for CD loud. I would be mastering for streaming quieter to meet those loudness normalization targets. Because why crush something and make it loud if it's just going to get turned down, right? I'm getting the added distortion from the extra limiting, but no benefit at the end of the day because you're not standing out against something else. Right. The reality is I rarely get asked to do that. Right, because oftentimes the song that I'm delivering that gets cut, if it's put on a CD these days, is the same one that's going out to streaming. There are cases where you're doing multiple masters, but oftentimes that's not the case. Vinyl is the exception, right? So vinyl, you really do have to be careful.
Before we get into vinyl, so I don't quite understand because you mentioned like of the thousands or whatever, only 50 have not mentioned loudness, but loudness doesn't matter anymore. So I guess I don't get it if like someone wants it loud, but you can't make it loud because the streaming service won't accept it. So help me make sense.
So the streaming service will accept it. They'll just turn back it down. So the old school advantage when you had a bunch of CDs in your CD changer where, when the loud CD came on, you'd be like, whoa, it just automatically sounded better. Like psychoacoustically, you're attracted to louder stuff. That is largely lost on streaming services. Having said that, nerdy engineer stuff, people have found ways to trick the loudness normalization algorithm via distortion and clipping and stuff to still make certain things sound a bit louder. So there's still ways that mastering engineers can fudge that. But by and large, that is what they're doing. So to your question, why do people still want stuff loud? I actually don't know. I mean, like I said, there is an aesthetic to when you crush something with a limiter, or in my case, I use 3 or 4 limiters on a song oftentimes. It does do something to the song viscerally, right? So it does have a sonic effect that people have grown to like after years and years of listening to really heavily limited music. There is something that people dig about that.
So is it just compression? Is it just like they just want it more compressed? Is that
I actually don't
limited,
even use
I guess you call it?
I barely even ever use compression I use it occasionally, but I use compression lightly. I'm much more into to get loudness without a lot of this negative side effects of compression, like the pumping and stuff. I use limiting and clipping to accomplish that for the most part.
Okay.
But boring as that is, but it's fascinating. People still want stuff super, super loud and you know, they feel like that's a thing. And I'm sure there's legitimate reasons for it, but on streaming services, not as much as you would think. Unless you yourself as a listener are going in and turning off like the sound check feature in Apple Music, which is their loudness normalization. You can turn it off and then you're going to have things that are just all over the place, but I don't know why you would, but you could do it.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I turn it off on Apple Music personally, the sound check, because I just don't think anything is loud enough. Like for some of these things, they like do it for like I think it's like safety. Sometimes they're doing it too, and because it's like. They don't want you to turn it up loud enough. Loud, and then the next one could come on and it'd blow your eardrums out. And so like I've done it because I've just like listened to stuff and you know I subscribe to all the streaming services just so I can like test all of them out and see what it is and everything. And like I found things were actually louder on Spotify than Apple Music. But then I went in and like turned off the sound check. It was like I didn't have the right features in it, you know. And so I was like, oh, if I turn this off, now the things are equally as loud. And I was
closer, and they all have different loudness normalizations. They all set things at different levels, by the way. And the last thing I'll say is for this loudness wars thing is there's also a legitimate concern around this. Because like, let's say, forget streaming. Let's say you're pitching me a beat or you're pitching me a song and you send it to me. Let's say I'm a music supervisor and I've got a list of stuff I'm listening to just on my hard drive. Right? Like, is your song, are they going to take the time to turn your song up versus somebody else's song? Like, what is going to immediately catch their ear? You want any advantage you can possibly get in those scenarios. So in that sense, I understand why somebody would want their song crispy and loud and, you know, and ear candy-ish, even if it's maybe a little bit fatiguing, it potentially could help you stand out. So there's other reasons I've heard artists tell me that they want stuff super loud. So it's, you know, that's a good
point. I don't think disco has the loudness normalization yet.
No, I don't think so. That's a perfect example.
Supervisors are
I don't know
listening
if they do.
to music.
Yep,
right. I don't think they do. But okay, so now I want to talk vinyl because this is and let me just like set the stage a little bit. Now I'm a collector. I have, I don't know, over 1,000 records. I love vinyl. I love the ritual of it. I love, you know, having a friend come over and having them pick a record and seeing what they're going to pull out. I love the smell. I love the tactile nature, feeling it. I want to read the credits. I want to put it on. I got the cleaning stuff. I'm going to clean it. You know, I'm going to I love the whole ritual of listening to vinyl and then going and flipping the record over. And it's a whole experience. And just like, you know, I feel like I fall in love much deeper with music personally when I listen to vinyl and put on vinyl versus trying to listen to something on streaming services, which then just inherently becomes background noise or whatever. But 100%. Like, it's much more intentional. And, you know, but here's my struggle with it is like some of my favorite albums, newer albums, like digital albums, I guess. When I bought the vinyl, because this is like my thing, when I fall in love with a record, I'll go and buy the vinyl record, usually new, if I'm not crate digging and finding some old classic records, of course, which is my preference. And sometimes those records sound like shit. And like, I'll call out two of them, and I don't care. And their mastering engineers can come at me or the label because they should have done a better job.
Watch but it be like, me. Oh, God.
Alabama Shake, Sound and Color is one of my favorite albums of the last 10 years.
Record. Yeah.
Great record. I love that record. I'm a huge Alabama Shakes fan. I saw them at the Greek. Like, you know, the vinyl record, I'm telling you, let me tell you about the process. So first I bought the record and it was a translucent vinyl thing. It was thin, it was whatever. And first off, it was skipping all over the place. It was just like, it just would not play well. And I was like, that's interesting. Okay, this is just a faulty record. So I wrote into ATO and they like sent me a replacement. I was like, oh, that's nice. And then I was listening to him, like, it just didn't sound, it was thin and it didn't have that dynamics. And it was like, do you have like non-translucent records? Like, do you have like just a 180 or just like a black record? Because personally, like And, then they sent me a black record and like it was 180. I was like, oh, this is going to be better. I listened to it. Still wasn't great. And I even took it to a hi-fi studio friend of mine who's got like a full setup. We listened through like $100,000 stereo setup with his turntable, and we put the record on. And he's like, wow, this is not a good vinyl master. This is not a good vinyl. And so I was like, great, it's not just me. And, I'm like, so what's the deal with all of this? Like, how can this happen? And and personally, and maybe this is, I don't know, but like, everyone is like now into the colored vinyl. I found that colored vinyl, and this is just like, this is my own thing. And I don't know if this is accurate or not, but like I've had more issues with colored vinyl than black vinyl. Splash vinyl is the worst. I've had so many issues with like splash color vinyl. I don't know, the grooves aren't there, and the needle skips a bunch, and then also like, I've just found that old records, by and large, just sound better than new records out of the box. Talk to me about all of this and just like where you, like your experience with vinyl or mastering for vinyl.
All right, cool. So let me specify first, I am not an expert in mastering for vinyl. I do it because on projects, because I'm typically doing, obviously, projects for streaming and or less so CD duplication for bigger artists, CD duplication. Yep. And vinyl is kind of an add-on to that. Now, of course, in the past few years, the popularity of vinyl has soared, right? So now it's becoming a bit more of a thing. So here would be my guess, okay? And I've had this experience on a couple projects that were pretty disappointing for me, where I did the master and I said, okay, so now I'm going to do a vinyl master, right? Now, that means I'm going to treat the song clearly a little bit differently than I would treat it for, let's say, streaming. And I will hear back from many times the label that, no, we're good. We're just going to release the music, the same music that's on Spotify. We're going to send that same wave file to the cutting engineer and have them cut that. Which means if, talking about the loudness stuff, right, those are very loud tracks, right? So you're not really creating the content to fit the medium, which was the case back in the day, right? Where you were mixing these songs knowing that vinyl was the target, and you want to take advantage of vinyl as the medium, and you want to sculpt the song so they fit and sound the best on that. Vinyl is, a lot of cases, the afterthought. Not on every project, but on a lot of projects, right? Because I've met with an artist this week, and they were like a large, big artist, and they were like, yeah, we know that a lot of people are going to buy these records, and a lot of people might not even listen to them, right? It's just kind of like a collector's thing, and it's a vibe thing. It's like buying cassettes anymore, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, that's interesting, because like when you're mixing or mastering for vinyl, you have to be really cognizant of how much bass is in a song, because that can cause the needle to skip, right? How sibilant vocals are. You can get away with stuff in digital formats you can't get away with in vinyl. Stereo width issues, right? You got cutting grooves into the record, right? If those are, you can have issues if things are too wide. And ultimately, it's about the amount of music that's on the side of a record. The more music you try to cram on the side of a record, the less quality, the narrower and less deep the grooves are going to be, which can cause skipping and other things, right? So there's all
Most say that you like a maximum of like 22 minutes.
That's it.
Side.
You
that's
can go
like
higher.
The absolute most you should have. You can go higher, and I have records that are higher, and it sounds like shit. It's really thin, and it's really
totally true. Totally.
Yeah.
So there's all that kind of stuff, and it's and it's to some degree maybe it's a little bit of a lost art, and when it comes to preparing tracks properly for vinyl. But again, you also have to have the labels care enough to want you to prepare the audio in the proper way for vinyl, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And I think that's what leads to a lot of really kind of poor sounding vinyl.
So frustrating. So when you actually do master for vinyl, and you touched on this briefly earlier, where you're like, "Oh, I'm not a cutting engineer or whatever." Like,
they really know what they're doing. Yeah.
So how does that work? If you were to send, or the label's like, we're just going to send the streaming files, the digital files to the cutting engineer, wouldn't they step in and be like, "Yo, this isn't working"?
Well, and they do.
Do they have any quality control with this? Or
So what they end up doing is, now they don't have any control over the dynamics, because the song is already crushed. It's already loud. So they can't undo that really, right? There's no magic trick yet. There's some AI tools that claim to allow that, but I haven't really had one that's worked yet. But they absolutely will do things like adjust the stereo width. They'll mono out the bass, right? So if bass is stereo, it can really cause problems for the needle. So they'll go, and let's say everything below 100 hertz, or some cases even 200 hertz, they'll start to mono that out so it really sits as it should on the record. So yes, they'll deal with sibilance issues. They know better than myself or anybody else what that medium can handle. So if I haven't made now I'm trying to make those adjustments if I'm doing a proper master for vinyl, but they're probably even correcting things that I've done to make it even a little bit better, right? So, but yeah, they're 100% having to do that because otherwise they would ship you a record and it would technically not play properly, right? And that would be an issue, kind of like it sounds like you had a few of those issues.
I've had so many of these issues with like some great records, and not to just throw Alabama Shakes under the bus with this because I think they're brilliant, but like Casey Musgraves is another record, that Golden Hour record, which I also love this album so much. The vinyl record is unlistenable. Like it is literally unlistenable. It's like distorting, and it's thin. And it's crushed. It just like does not sound good when the digital, when the record on stream service sounds brilliant. And I love that. So I'm more critical of like some of my favorite records. But yeah, it's really, really weird.
And again, not to belabor this, the mastering of vinyl thing, but it is interesting because like the artist may or may not have had any say in that at all, right? It could be the label just being like Atmos mixes. There's a lot of Atmos mixes out there that are garbage that the artist never even heard. The label's just like, let's hire somebody for $50 to do on headphones and stick it up and see if we get any money out of it. Vinyl can be the same way. And because there's all these extra, the mastering engineer may have done a great job, and maybe it's the cutting, engineer that did a poor job of putting it on. The way that this is supposed to work is that if I send something off to be mastered for vinyl, they're going to send me a test pressing of that record that I listen to. And this happens on bigger projects. And I give a thumbs up to. I make sure there's no weird skipping. I make sure there's nothing I didn't intend that is on that pressing, and then they go off and press however many thousands of them they're going to press.
So you listen to those test pressings?
They come to me, and they also sometimes if the artist really gives a crap, they go to the artist too. And I work with a lot of artists who do, as they should, right? And they'll QC it as well. But we're also listening for different things, right? I'm listening more to the technical stuff, and they're listening more to the general vibe of their art. But it's important.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of my albums pressed on vinyl and gotten the test pressings and gone back. And like, man, my last pressing was honestly an extremely frustrating process because the mastering engineer I was working with, similar. They were just mastering digitally, and so they sent the files and they made them, a bit quieter, and they did some other things. I don't know. They mastered them for vinyl digitally, and then I got the test pressings, and there was like distortion. It was just like there was distortion on the test pressings, and I was like, well, this is not really subjective here. Like this is distorting. And it was like on all of the they send 5 test pressings, and I listened to them. I was like, it's distorting in the same place at all of them where the digital file sounds great.
It's not.
What's going on here? And so like, okay, we're back and forth. And we had 3 rounds of this nonsense.
Good
and I was
Lord.
like, man, I don't even know what to do because I'm not like really an engineer. So then I'm working with like the mastering engineer, and my mixing engineer even is getting in his ears in there, and like then working with the plant. I was like, oh my, and I'm not a project manager. Like I'm the artist
Being
in this
an artist
but like
is hard. That's the moral of the story.
I know
man.
shit.
Good Lord.
But anyway, so it's a wild thing. So I want to pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Now we have automated mastering tools, and of course LANDR made its name, I would say, as the first mass scale automated mastering tools. And I'm just curious, like, what your involvement with the LANDR master tools have been, how it got started, and just like what you think about all of this as a mastering engineer and where it's important, like, to work with a human mastering engineer versus where can you just use an automated service like a LANDR mastering service, which full disclosure, I've used LANDR to master some tracks, especially for like sync, for instrumentals or whatever, or for like, I don't know, live stuff or things that were not on a budget, or like things I was just releasing Bandcamp only for like fan only releases or whatever. And it's like, it was really good for that personally. But I'm just curious, as a mastering engineer who's so involved with LANDR, like, where do you fall on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I came on at LANDR, I said almost a little over 10 years ago, and I came on as somebody who was I've been very lucky because the artists that I've worked with in the past, I was with Adrian Blue as his producer for a long time, Trent Reznor working with Nine Inch Nails for a bit. Like they always were like very tech forward, right? So not scared of new technology. So when I stumbled across LANDR, I was, my gut reaction was like, oh crap, but then I was like, no, wait a second, let me think about this. And I love the idea because pretend I charge $100 a master, right? I don't, but let's pretend I charge $100 a master. There's 90% of the people making music in the world might not have microphones that cost $100, right? Like the idea that for every song that they create, they would hire me to master their song is insane, right? So when you complain as a mastering engineer about automated mastering services, like you're going to lose business or something, these are people that will never be giving you business unless they, the way that I think engagement happens with music is if you get something back that surprises you, right, that sounds better than what you put in, whether it's a composing thing, whether it's mixing, whether it's mastering, you feel good and you continue to make music and you level up and you learn more and you progress, right? And of course, you want people listening to your music as well, but you want to be personally fulfilled by the art that you're creating before it is external to you. And I think automation can help that when people don't have the ability to go out and hire like a proper mastering engineer in this case, right? And ultimately those people end up, if they continue on in their journey as an artist or a producer or whatever, they end up buying equipment. They end up eventually hiring somebody like me or becoming a mixer mastering engineer. You never know, right? So I think providing tools that are financially accessible for people that give them good results back is important. And we just can't, there's no way with the amount of content in the world that exists now that mastering engineers can do that at scale at the price they would need to do it at. So I support it from that perspective. And I came on board supporting it, but also being critical of what it sounded like, right? I was like, okay, this is cool, but man, it needs to sound better. And we have some amazing audio engineers at LANDR. And I came on as one of them in the early days as a senior audio engineer just to work on the algorithm and make it sound better. And we brought in some of the top mastering engineers in the world to listen to it, to give us settings, to critique it, to help shape it. And it's been, 13 years the company's been around now. And it's been a lot of that, a lot of thousands and thousands and thousands of human hours of mastering engineer hours listening to it and sculpting it to get it to be what it is now. And it's pretty damn good. I will say though, I will say this to anybody that is working on music. If you have a budget, right, and you have to spend your budget on mixing or mastering, where do you spend that money? You spend it on mixing 100% of the time because, and I alluded to this earlier, if I get a mix in that is great, I'm not doing barely anything to it. If you give an AI algorithm a good one, like a LANDR, right, I'm biased, but we spent more money and more time on this than anybody else has. It's going to give you a good master because the mix was good. The place that AI isn't so great yet across the board is when you feed it something that is really problematic, but it has a lot of nuanced problems that aren't very common. Like, so where I'm having to go in and be like a surgeon to your music and cut things out. And like I said, go in there and try to turn the vocals up and down and all that type of stuff. AI isn't there yet for that, but that really honestly means you should have spent more time on your mix, right? So I think I think AI can be great, and it just depends upon where you are in the food chain, what your budget is, what it's for. We have tons of very well-known artists, very well-known mix engineers who use LANDR for certain things. They're not necessarily using it for their multi-platinum release, but they're using it for all the demos. They're using it for the sync stuff, like you said. We have people who just use LANDR on drums, like on major songs. It's weird. Like it's interesting if you ever get to be involved in building technology. The way that users find ways to use the tech versus what you intended is always fascinating. We have people who use it I used it on a Pixar film that won an Academy Award for all the different sound effects that I was doing. I was just throwing in water sound effects into it and having them all balanced out. Like that's not what it was intended for, but it worked.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So there's lots of different use cases.
So, I think as AI gets integrated into every step of the creation workflow for artists, even, creation of marketing, everything now. I'm curious just like where you fall when it comes to AI integration. And it sounds to me like it's more of a tool in your, tool chest. But at the same time, it's like, do you feel like it will ever replace a human mastering engineer, or even just in general, because like, to set it up a little bit more, we now have, of course, fully AI generated songs. We, the Velvet Sundown made all the headlines, but Deezer said
there's a million
tens
of
of
those.
thousands.
Yeah, Apple Music was promoting fully AI generated music to me a year ago, right? And I took screenshots. I was like, I can't believe, because I know who made the music. I'm like, oh my God, that stuff is everywhere. Velvet Sundown is one of many examples.
Right. It's been around for years. I mean, I had the CEO and founder of the wellness music company, Endel.
I watched that episode, Endel. Now I got a book. I wasn't gonna bring this up with you, but I love the fact that you took issue with people getting credited as songwriters when they. That is not okay. That's why people hate
wild
AI.
To me.
That's why people hate AI.
Yeah.
People do shit like that.
Right. I drew the line there when this technologist cited himself as a songwriter on this fully AI generated song because like he started the company. I think that's
greedy. That feels like a pyramid scheme to me. I don't know how that is, right? I don't know how that works, but it doesn't really work.
But it's just interesting where everyone is drawing their own lines right now, and where just like. So I'm just curious, like, where do you fall with all of this? Not even really discuss. I mean, just take that as you will.
No, sure. Like, it's a complicated question, right? Because there's so many. You mentioned a few of these. There's so many different uses for AI, right? We have workflow AI tools, marketing AI tools. We've got tools. Okay, mastering. You've got mixing is now becoming a thing. Stem separation. Literally, I use this on a daily basis to go into a stereo mix and pull components of it out. That's literally impossible to do with any quality without AI, right? Like, so there's certain things that aren't just like replacements for something a human can do. It unlocks things that you can't do otherwise, right?
Right.
I think I don't think people have an issue with a chunk of that stuff. Where the LANDR used to be incredibly controversial, by the way. Like, I got a lot of people, friends and colleagues of mine in the industry, that would scream at me like really, really visceral emotional reactions, like I was going to destroy the music industry by joining LANDR. And of course, we have 13 years of data to prove that didn't happen. But the kind of ire now is shifted to generative AI, because we're not just talking about helping people polish the last step before they release music.
Right.
We're talking about the impetus of the idea of a song and where that comes from, that then, basically plows through the rest of the chain, right? You don't need anything else because you've made it. And it's complicated. Like, I think first of all, people, I do a lot of speaking about this, right? And I think people react really emotionally to this topic, and I understand that. Sure. But they also look at the wrong targets. I was speaking at South by Southwest a couple of years ago, and somebody got up and said, AI will never make music as good as what John Lennon and Paul McCartney could make. And I said, okay, but all right, there's 200 people in this room. How many of you can make music as good as John Lennon and Paul McCartney, right? What the fuck? What kind of target is that? What kind of, like, okay, so sometimes when we are scared by something, or it's not even we're scared, if something gets in our lane, like it is going to affect our livelihood or something that we're passionate about. In this case, we're talking about music. If it's self-driving cars and you're an Uber driver like my sister is, or a truck driver, that scares the crap out of you, but it might not be so scary to me, right? So it's also, it depends upon what it's applied to, but you tend to kind of make yourself feel better. You set the highest target of success you can and say, it'll never be Picasso or something like that. And it's like, well, no, but there's so many other use cases for music that aren't having to be Paul McCartney and John Lennon that this could be disruptive for, right? And I think sometimes people turn a blind eye to that just because it won't, I don't think AI is going to ultimately be replacing a lot of artists. I just don't believe that. I think there is a novelty to prompt-based creation that will get you so far. I think ultimately we'll have attribution models and we'll have even better detection technology, and we'll be able to kind of silo that stuff. As you're even seeing happening now. I work with distributors quite a bit, or DSPs as well, about like how they're approaching that. I'm not that concerned about it. I think, but it is absolutely going to impact the sync industry, right? It's going to impact things that are streams of revenues for artists, right? If I'm an ad guy and I need to source a song, am I going to Epidemic Sound, or am I pressing a button and generating that and paying $1? You know what I mean? Like there's things that are going to happen. And that's by the way, the case with every single new technology that comes out, right? So this isn't like a new thing. Digital did that. The workflows that you and I use to make music were incredibly disruptive to the generation before us, right? Like, and they looked at it like toys that no one will ever make. We all say the same crap, right? As we get older and new technology comes along, we can't help it. But AI is a little bit of a different animal. But I'm excited about it because of some of the things that it opens up that I think will actually make music more musical. Like give you one quick example. So a lot of people make music with samples, right? Or at least they start a song, sculpting a song from samples, and maybe you replace things, maybe you don't. It depends upon the genre. Samples are like Lego bricks, right? You assemble them together. It's a fairly static thing that runs through a song or components or sections of a song. Well, what we have the opportunity to do now is to take that 4-bar loop of whatever the hell it is, a piano, drums, and have it be contextually aware to the rest of the song you're created, have it change over time to fit with what you've created, right? And be dynamic, right? You're talking about taking static content and making it dynamic. So in that sense, that is a more musical experience than something you're just cutting and pasting and maybe, trying to edit a bit in Melodyne if you want to change the melody. So there's things about AI that I think are going to be very interesting when it comes to a songwriting thing. The thing I'm the most excited about, and I'll shut up after this, it's the opposite of what Suno does. Okay. So look at a Suno or a Udio who are, you're prompting something, you're getting a song, right?
Yeah.
And then they can kind of let you stem separate that song, pull the parts out, and you can sort of try to edit that into something new, but it doesn't really work that well because the technology isn't there. What I want is something that will help me build a song from the ground up, generating the building blocks of the song, the drums, the bass, and whatever. I can put my guitar loop in there or my guitar part that I created, and it will help me with a saxophone solo that goes with that, right? That I can use as a reference to give to a player. I can keep it. I can do whatever I want. So I have the agency of what I want to contribute and what I want it to help me with, maybe helping me produce in styles that I'm not really familiar with, right? To take me outside of the box that we are all in, right? Based upon our experiences and what we've listened to. I think AI absolutely opens up your creative palette, or it has the potential to, if it's presented in the right way. And I don't think it's really been presented in the right way yet. And we'll have something out in a few months that is my example of what I think creatives actually want from AI. And I wish I could talk about it to you right now, but it is the ultimate example of, I think, what this should be. And we'll find out if I'm right or wrong about that. But I think the idea of just prompting a song and trying to deconstruct it is not what creatives want, because we're creative, right? Unless you want to sample something.
Right.
Yeah, you want something that's a co-writer, not something that's I feel like it has all the agency and I can get in here and there,
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I love that idea and that perspective on it, because it is true. I mean, even samples have come such a long way from, the hip hop artists who literally were just like cutting up old funk records and trying to find those with a foundational beat there, like literally just a drum loop. And then some of those samples that they would rap over, like we've come a long way to how you can manipulate samples and where you find samples. And now we have sample packs and there's a whole business around that and, all of that. And and using it as a tool, I think the people that are going to lean in to using these tools, similar to how producers have leaned into, various samples or plugins or just like all the tools that we have. I mean, MIDI. Hell, MIDI was something that was like game changing when that first came out.
And incredibly disruptive, right? People thought MIDI was terrible, the advent of synthesizers and keyboards. I'm not trying to say that AI is the same as those things. Yeah, drum machines. A lot of people make direct analogies with those things. AI is a little bit different, obviously. Yes. But we do rely
because it can pump out a whole song at the with a couple prompts, which is kind of insane.
Pump out 10,000 songs with a couple of prompts, right? Like it's the scale of it that makes it even more potentially problematic than you don't see with some of these other things. So it's there's not a direct analog, but again, I think I've had some of my most creatively inspiring moments in my entire life as a musician engaging with AI, if you know what to engage with. Right. So it can be, and I think people will get to those moments, but again, it's not really been presented, I think, in the right way because of the companies. Honestly, what you see, little rant here, you see companies that aren't from the music industry that look at the music industry and they see there's a lot of money to be made. Right. So they come in and they develop technology that's just trying to address the biggest total addressable market they can, which is not musicians. It's every casual person, every fan that they go to VCs and private equity and they say, look, every fan wants to be an artist, so give us a bunch of money and we'll build the thing that can do that. And then they realize not every fan really wants to pay for a service to generate music to be an artist. They want to listen to actual artists, right? They might want to send their mom a birthday song, but that's that the engagement they thought they would get is not the engagement they actually got, right? So now you see a lot of those companies backpedaling a bit and starting to approach musicians and hiring famous musicians to represent them and doing this stuff because they realize they really do need the creator community, whose music they're stealing, by the way, to participate in their success. We're in such a weird spot with that right now, with all the legal stuff going on and the hundreds of millions of dollars being spent to lobby the government to allow these companies to use your music and my music. It's a weird spot, man. And it's something that will come out over the next couple of years. And I don't really know how it's all going to land, to be honest with you. But this is something we're in a transformative time that we will be talking about for decades as this technology figures out where the hell it's going to fit in and how it works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have an idea of how this is going to play out.
I have an idea too, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. And even though the major labels and major publishers are suing Suno and Udio, I feel they're going to settle. I know it's like how everything else has played out over the years when it comes to technology. Is the tech companies with all the money are going to throw a shit ton of money at the major labels as essentially a bribe, and they're going to call it an advance for licensing, which is going to be bull. They're going to take the money, they're going to pocket it, and the shareholders of the major labels will be happy. And that's just like the story of the last 20 years, right, with technology and the majors and whatever. But maybe this will be a little bit different because there are some indies that are getting involved in the lawsuits and that, won't be like bought off the same way that the majors can be. But who knows? We'll see. Anyway, not to go down that tangent, but yeah.
And hey, the other extra thing I'll throw in there is that the government themselves, right, are being lobbied to enact laws that even would circumvent the label's need to license content to these companies, right? That cuts everybody out and just gives everybody's music as fair use for training, right? So there's like, it's such a multi-layered problem, and we're just kind of the artists and producers and engineers at the bottom of all of this. But that's the reason, in closing on that topic, it's the reason I got involved with LANDR back in the day. Even though it was kind of a controversial thing, I come from the music industry. I think I have the best interest of artists and myself as a producer and engineer at heart. And you think you need more people like that to shepherd these companies forward in a way that is responsible for the industry that we're all trying to build, not people coming from Silicon Valley looking at us as a target to shoot at, to mine, right, money from. And I think that's where there are, and it's not just me, there's a bunch of people who are out there trying to do this the right way. And I'd like to see more of that, if possible.
Love that. No, I appreciate that, and that's a great place to close it, Daniel. I mean, it's been a pleasure hearing your perspective on all this, and we do need more people that have the artist's best interests at heart at these companies. I mean, I feel we'd be a very different place if Suno and Udio welcomed the creative community and the artists and producers from the get-go versus where we're at now. But it's we're at a wild point right now, but we're all still doing it. We're still making music, and if the last 10 years goes to show that where people were terrified of mastering engineers losing their jobs because of the AI mastering technology hasn't come to fruition. Hopefully artists and producers and mixing and everyone's not we're still the artistic creative class will still survive and still make its way through this at the end of the day.
Long story short, if you are good at what you do, you will always have an outlet for that, right? Whether, you will always be a way for you to work and get paid to do that, right? It just, you just got to put in the effort and the time to get there. And ultimately, the thing that matters the most, whether you're using AI or not, is that you have a perspective, you have something to say, and you have a sense of taste, right? And you can impart that taste to an AI tool or a guitar or whatever. That's what matters. And that's where your true value is, beyond any technical ability or your ability to use a computer.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel, this is very fascinating, illuminating, and really, exciting conversation. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
Oh,
what is making it?
What is making it? Oof. Let's see. So for me, there's two sides of it really quickly. Like, to work with people that I respect, right? When I got to a level that I could work with people, famous or not, that I grew up respecting, and they showed me, gave me some flowers back. Like, I felt like, forget about the money and financial stuff, right? Because I worked for free for years and years and years and years before I ever got paid for anything. Like, that's the thing that made me feel like I made it. And I think the other thing is when I felt like I was, my career has been based on diversification. I know you talk about this with artists about how you can diversify and get multiple streams of revenue. And I think when I was able to feel like, no matter what happens in the industry, no matter what happens with social media algorithms, no matter what happens with things that are outside of my control, I am diversified enough to survive that. So I feel kind of stable in that regard, that I can support myself and support my family. I think that's the other thing that really made me feel like I made it, because I feel like I'm here for the long haul now, right? And I'm not as susceptible to disruptive things outside of my control. And in my case, right, that's creative projects, working on tech, and in education, and that's been my kind of the secret to my success.
Right on. Daniel, that was great. Thank you so much.
Good stuff, man.
This episode was edited by Peter Schrupp with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.